What's going on, everybody? Stupid Up 76 here, and YuGiOh, Konami, whoever the PR guy is for Genesys, had just released a new forum talking about their plans for Genesys, some point allocations. We haven't got a new point list yet, don't get too excited, but they did say what cards are going to be pointed and what cards are going to be having point adjustments based on the results that they have for the Proto YCS, as well as people putting up their deck lists online using the hashtag YGOHgenesis. I read this late last night. I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw that it was up, and I was like, oh, this is up. And I saw some people having thoughts about it, so I read it, and yeah, I have some thoughts too, so we're going to talk about it today. First up, we're going to be talking about is new cards from Maze of Muertos. There aren't many of these that are getting points. The most important is the Genesys to Maya, since it makes Red Eyes Dark Dragoon's point cost almost irrelevant. Yeah, I kind of did. I was thinking about that when I saw the Genesys to Maya. Now, that being said, you can only play one Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, and it is in my personal opinion that one Omni Negate does not a good deck make. However, what you can do is just splashes and a bunch of other stuff, so it kind of makes a good deck even better. Like, a lot of cards are already playing the Dragoon package and TCG, like Branded, White Forest, Shining Sarcophagus. Shining Sarcophagus in Genesys would get the biggest advantage from this because you're able to use this to cheat out Dragoon, and the entirety of Shining Sarc, unless it got pointed and I just didn't pay attention to it, is still 0 points. So you get a 100-point allocation to Dragoon plus your Shining Sarc core. I don't think it should be pointed to high hell. However, it does need it doesn't need a significant amount, but it just needs points, so that way decks that have 0 main deck cost or just 0 core cost don't get a free Dragoon. Side note, we discussed Maze of Muertos with duelists at the events and whether or not the pumpkin cards really need a huge number of points tossed on them preemptively. We were able to suss out that players don't actually believe every new theme that releases is so powerful it needs to immediately have 60 or so points slapped to its engine. And I agree with that. Not every engine that comes out needs immediate point allocation. What needs to happen is that you really need to take a deep look at these cards and see what cards people are playing in Genesys to see if they need points allocated accordingly. We don't want another Radiant Typhoon mix-up where it's just obliterates into the format and just completely takes over. User Spray Outliers. This category covers cards used in decks that were significant performance outliers. As a reminder for a few basic facts, every tournament will have exactly one winner. Every tournament has a most popular deck. Just being the most popular deck doesn't mean that points are going to go sky high, but if the margin between the most popular deck and the rest of the pack is massive, the point increases will be larger. Which, yeah, if you have 100 players and you have 75 of those 100 players playing the best deck and everybody else is playing the second best deck, you might need some more point allocation. We don't want a tier 0 format. We want a format that has a plethora of decks. Don't get me wrong, TCG right now is pretty good in that sense, but still the top 3 decks for the past year have been K9 VS, Dracotel, and Yummy, and it seems like that's not going to change anytime soon. Across the Proto YCS events, Cool Tune was by far the most played deck with 53 duelists, not counting the White Forest decks that use some Cool Tune cards as an additional engine. So they're not counting decks that are like, this is a White Forest deck with a small Cool Tune package. They're looking at decks saying, oh, this is overwhelmingly Cool Tune with like a few extra cards in it. This is a Cool Tune deck, which I think is very good. I think they need to take a look at that as opposed to if it's being used in the side. Like, if Branded is being used as more of like a side package to get out cards as opposed to a like deck in itself, you probably don't need an overwhelming of points added to it. Not saying that that's how Branded is playing, I'm just using that as the example. That's twice as many decks as Exo Sister with 27, which was the second most played deck. Following Exo Sisters were Monarchs 22, White Forest 19, Dracotail 18, Vanquish 17, Radiant Typhoon 16, and Archmage 15. I'm noticing a pattern here. Remember how I said Dracotail and K9 VS were the 2 of the 3 best decks in the format in TCG? Yeah, they're here in Genesys too. And I feel like that's a little bit frustrating because we don't want Advanced 2 with like just watered down hand traps. We want a format where almost any deck can shine. I say almost because, let's be honest, Cubics aren't going to shine in any format they're in, as painful as it is for me to say. Even then, Radiant Typhoon is still in here, and Radiant Typhoon is a great engine in the TCG. It's arguably like the 4th greatest deck in the game, and it's got a lot of coverage in TCG because it works really well with Yummy. It's a very good splashable engine, This is just advanced with Archmage, Monarchs, and Exo Sisters. That's what we're looking at here. So I do think that there needs to be some points allocated to those, because if they're that good that they're dominating 2 formats, we need some more points allocated to it. Despite winning the Dortmund event, Cooltoon's overall win rate hovered around 50% for the weekend. Many players commented that they sat down for real YCS level competition. They found out that some of their card choices built up around casual events weren't correct for a 7+ round Swiss tournament against exclusively strong decks. And I feel like that's kind of a fault to the community where players are playing and not to Konami themselves. Don't get me wrong, it's Konami's job to make a format that we want to play. However, how can they get that data to make the format what we want if people aren't playing? As it currently stands, there's not really any incentive for players to move out of Advanced into Genesis aside from we just want to play Genesis. There's no special prize pack allocation, there's no special events, there's really not anything other than the Winamats at side events and at YCSs and stuff like that. Other than that, there's no real special prize for this. And once you win that mat in a Genesis event, you don't really need to win another one. You can just say I got 2, but there's just not any mats to win. It's just a 1. And for players who didn't play back, in 2004, that mat has 0 nostalgia meaning for them. I want one because I'm a Yugi boomer and I played back in like 2004 to 2006 era, but for the person who picked up the game in 2018, they're not going to give a shit about that mat. I'm sorry to say that. They're just not. And even then, the person who picked it up in 2018 probably isn't playing Genesis because, again, with Dracotail, Vanquished Soul, and Radiant Typhoon being in this format, why would they play watered-down versions of those decks when they can just play TCG and play the best versions of those decks they possibly can? Many players regretted choosing Exo Sisters, and the data bears that out. No top 8 finishes, 2 total top 32 finishes between both events, and an overall win rate closer to 40% than 50%. Due to the play rate, they've earned some more points, but due to the lack of success, the increases will be far smaller than they would for even a 50% win rate deck. So because Exo Sisters did well, they are getting points, but they're not getting as many points as Cooltoon because they didn't perform as well. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, if there is no top 8 for a deck, I feel like you don't need to allocate points to them. Now, I didn't play in the Genesis qualifiers. As you guys know, I was playing in the main event with my Blue Eyes deck for starting from scratch. Otherwise, I would have loved to play in the Genesis YCS. Hell, the next YCS I go to, I might even play Genesis in that if I can get a deck suited for it, which we're going to get to my thoughts on that. But I feel like the only time a deck really needs point allocation if it's overwhelmingly strong and is consistently getting into the top 8. Like I just said, Exo Sisters got 0 top 8s, but they got 2 of the 32 finishes. I don't think that warrants a point allocation. If anything, with a record like that, I feel like they could afford to get some points taken off of them. I don't know. If they want Exo Sister, first off, I don't know why they chose Exo Sister specifically, but I'm just going off based on what they say. And what they say, I see there's no reason for them to allocate points to Exo Sister. It seems like it's going to be a fair deck for the format that anybody can pick up for dirt cheap. So I don't know why they would want to point it. Usage rate outliers engines. Prophecy has finally come true. Radiant Typhoon Vision finally showed up as a popular draw engine in non-Radiant Typhoon decks. How popular was it? More than 3 times as popular as the Radiant Typhoon deck itself. This is a big chance for the individual stage of a rollout where it's almost exclusively in Radiant Typhoon decks. So right now, Radiant Typhoon Vision is being more so a pot of greed than it is an actual Radiant Typhoon card, and no shit. That's pretty much why people use it in Radiant Typhoon decks in the TCG, so I don't know why it would be different in Genesis. As it stands right now, Chant and Eldom are the only 2 on here, and it's 33 and 10. Why they didn't put down Vision, I don't know. They've given points to cards before they released before, so why they wouldn't put it on Vision, I don't know. Now, you could make the argument that they could have put a few points on it. I could have lived with that, like, oh, we put on like 10 points just to kind of like dial it back a little bit, and then we saw the results and we realized we needed to make more. But to just not put any points on it whatsoever, what were you thinking, Konami? What were you thinking? The Genesis cards were spread outside of just for Genesis and Vanquished Soul, and at the same time, the actual Genesis deck players have also been asking for a rebalance of their points like we did for Adventure and Branded. I mean, I didn't see any Regenesis decks being made outside of Regenesis VS. Like, that's the only deck I've really been seeing. So I have no I have no comment on that, to be honest with you. Also in this category will be some changes to Punk, as well as Medius, the Pure, and Etherealize, which now appear as engines across 3 different decks. Non-engine outliers. This is where Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit and friends will appear. Cool Tune is really messing up numbers with this category, since as a synchro deck, it's very tuner heavy, and the Ghost Girls are all tuners, so this gets tricky. But a card like Ash Blossom and Joy Spring is definitely creeping up in usage, so it's going to go up in cost. It's still showing up in less than a quarter of North American decks, by the way, and even fewer in Europe. At the same time, Drone Lockbird has dropped in use, no surprise, so will decrease a little bit, but not down to where it was before. This is a huge mistake. Don't do this. As it stands right now, Drone Lockbird is at 25 points in Genesis, and I don't think it needs to drop. Yes, 25 is a huge chunk of your points, but that's the point. Drone Lockbird was a unfun floodgate that you marked as the same cost as Nibiru at the time, and then you bumped it up to 25 to get it out of the format, and now you're saying you're going to lower it now. They're saying they're not going to lower it down to where it was in the single digits, but even if they lower it down to 20, I've been playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For the past 6 years, and there's one thing that I've learned is that if you give Yu-Gi-Oh! Players an inch, the Chuds will take a country mile. They will find some way to fit this in their deck. Like, for example, right now, Dominus Purge is 20 points apiece. If you tell me I can either play Purge or Droll, I'm picking Droll every time. And Purge is a more fair Ash because not every deck can afford to play Purge. Not just in point value, but because of the cards that you play. It locks you out of Darks, Water, and Fire. And last time I checked, Vanquished Soul needs Darks. Last time I checked, the Draco Tail has dark monsters. You gotta need those. And for the few people actually playing the Bistro monsters, yeah, they're all darks. So I don't think Purge needs to go up. Not even that this is about Purge, it's about Ash and Droll. But again, if you tell me Droll or Purge, I'm picking Droll every time. Because that's just common sense. Your opponent gets one search. Ash Blossom is currently at 15 points, so I can see this thing being bumped up. I can see this being bumped up to probably the same level as Purge. Because like I said, Purge is just a worse Ash Blossom. I don't think Purge needs to go down per se with Ash Blossom going up, but I think Ash and Purge should probably be on the same level. Actually, I just looked it up. I am a liar. Purge is 10 points. Yeah, bump Ash up. My point still stands though. If you tell me I can play 2 Purge or a single Droll, getting the one of Droll is still phenomenally better than getting either Purge. The standard side deck. Over 60% of all competitors' side decks started with 3 DD Crow, 3 Cosmic Cyclone, and 3 Ultimate Slayer. Most extra decks begin with Garura, Wings of Resonant Life, Golden Cloud Beast, Malong, and Myriadic Aggregator. More than half of duelists also played 3 Dark Ruler No More. These and similar cards will no longer be free, will cost points simply because the basic Genesis rule. Heavily played cards go up, less played cards go down. I think this is going to really damage the format to the point of unplayability. Starting off my thoughts with Dark Ruler No More, I think Dark Ruler is a broken enough card to where it should be pointed. Currently, Dark Ruler No More is at 0 points. I don't think it's busted enough to be pointed heavily, like, 10, 15, 20 points, but I think it's broken enough to where it could stand a 5-pointer. You know what I mean? It should be like, I got 10 points left, I'll put Dark Ruler in here. Ultimate Slayer and friends, those cards don't need to be pointed. And the reason I say that is because it feels like we're being hurt for developing a meta in a game. Like, there needs to be a meta. There needs to be cards that every deck plays. Like, every deck in the TCG plays Ash Blossom. Every deck in the TCG currently plays Ghost Belt. Depending on the format, it changes. There should be certain staples that stay unpointed and just don't ever get touched. Not because, like, oh, this is like, Genesis rules this card never be touched, but it's because it's the face of the format. I feel like DD Crow is one of the faces of the format. If they were to point anything, they don't need to point everything. If I could see anything aside from Dark Ruler being pointed, it would be Ultimate Slayer. And even then, Ultimate Slayer doesn't need any significant amount of points. It needs like 3 max. And that's just to limit the number that you use. DD Crow and Cosmic Cyclone, I think, should go untouched. DD Crow by itself is not broken enough to warrant it being hit on the point system. Like, without Cosmic Cyclone, what are we doing against Odeon? Like, let's be real here. And then you can make the argument, oh, well, they'll just hit Odeon more. Are we just going to make every deck 100 points until there's just no deck we can play outside of just, like, pure normal monsters? Is that what we're going to do here? Like I said, hitting everything on here is going to harm the game in ways that it can't be unharmed, because at this point you're going to lose the trust of players of saying, hey, you want us to play literal dog shit. I mean, once you get DD Crow, what's going to be left? Cycle Reader? And where's Skullmeister? I see that little fucker floating around Genesis all the time. Where is he on this list? He's in almost every Genesis list I see. I know why he's not on here. It's because DD Crow banishes a card into Graveyard regardless of what's activated. Whereas Skullmeister is a Graveyard activated in Grave Negate, much like Spirit Wise Blue is in the TCG. But still, it's just aggravating that we've developed a meta and now they're harming the meta. What this does is that it incentivizes players to come up with a really busted deck and not share it until a big event where they can just stomp on everybody. And then it doesn't get pointed until it's too late. They won with that deck. They know people are going to be picking it up. They know the people who are going to share this list are going to spread it like wildfire. So now they're going to find something else that's insanely buku busted and just hoard it for themselves. If you want people to show their deck list and to share it to help this format grow, you cannot take away the generic like 0-point stuff that can work in any deck. You can't get rid of all of it. There's certain cards you can't get rid of, but you have to look at what the cards do, and is this healthy for the format? And in this case, you're taking away cards that are healthy for the format, and then you're giving us cards that are unhealthy like Droll. And also, no mention of Dimensional Fissure, no mention of Macrocosmos, no mention of D-Shifter. I mean, come on, Shifter is still 10 points. You're saying Shifter is less broken than Ash Blossom? Are we for real here, Konami? Cosmos and Fissure are at 0. You're saying you're going to hit DD Crow, Cosmic Cyclone, and Ultimate Slayer and Friends, but Dimension Fissure is at 0. What are we doing? And you're getting rid of the best card to get rid of Dimensional Fissure. Low usage decks players like. We're taking another pass over the points list, looking over decks players seem to like, but feel the points are a bit too heavy on. The poster deck here is shockingly Dragon Rulers. Imagine that it'd like to travel back in time a decade and tell your younger selves how much players want fewer restrictions on the Dragon Rulers, but have laughed ourselves out of the room, and yet here we are. So they're looking at decks that players like that are pointed heavily, and we're saying they're going to potentially lift it a little bit because we don't have any representation. Again, that's fine. Point the decks that are getting a big representation, unpoint the decks that aren't, and if they're being represented but just aren't performing phenomenally, leave them alone. Like, again, you made the Exorcister analogy earlier. You're saying go to point it. You just said it didn't get top 8. Made top 32 and only 2 of the 32. Leave it alone. FTKs and pseudo FTKs. Since we want to keep these out of Genesis, some miscellaneous cards, mostly draw spells, will be getting points tacked on. A few people tried some FTKs at these events. They didn't do so hot, but it's the only way to be sure. After we make this update, we're going to leave things alone, though, the end of Genesis Celebration events. There will be another update for the launch of Blazing Dominion on its premiere event weekend, just like we did for Burst Protocol. If something pressing comes up during the next month and a half, we'll address it so players can get ready for YCS Columbus on May 23rd. Keep on posting those deck lists using hashtag YGO-Genesis. So they're going to make a new point list update when Blazing Dominion comes out, and I hope that they take the community's feedback into consideration with this. They seem to be doing, I won't say a phenomenal job. I'll say they're doing an okay job so far. But if they're going to have this format last, they have to incentivize players to share the list. And I know it's hard for them to do so. Like, the biggest thing that they get to go off of is tournament results. And the only tournaments that seem to be going on right now are the bigger ones, like side events, the pseudo YCS at YCS Richmond and stuff, or the proto YCS, I should say, and YCS Richmond. Because, like, I tried doing a Genesis side event at a regional in Knoxville. I tried going there. I dropped out of the main event. I wanted to do a Genesis event, but nobody wanted to play Genesis. And the people running the event, and this, again, I don't blame Konami. The Konami doesn't directly influence the people running the events. John Konami is not looming over their shoulders to make sure that they're doing this unless it's at the YCS events. They don't really do that for regionals. But whenever I sit there for 2 hours and nobody comes up, and I'm like, okay, I'll do a Winamat to try to do a Winamat while waiting on more people to do Genesis, and then I wait another 45 minutes because they didn't want to start because 2 people didn't pay and just never came back. And then they tried calling the 2 people for Winamat 2 to come up there, and we waited another 20 minutes on those guys. I mean, come on. It's like they're actively, like, again, this is not Konami. These are the judges that were running that event, but it feels like they were actively sabotaging that event, and I couldn't play because by the time they called it, I was in the middle of a Winamat that at the time I was winning. I say at the time because I did lose that Winamat, but you know, that's not what we're talking about. If you want this format to succeed, I implore you, not only post your deck lists using the hashtag YGO on any social media, not just Twitter, do it on Twitter, Blue Sky, TikTok, YouTube, MySpace, Facebook, X videos. I don't know, whatever you use. Maybe not X videos. I don't think Konami would like that too much. But use that hashtag. Don't even just post deck lists. If you have an opinion about what they're talking about, post it and use that hashtag because it makes them see it. I know I don't make a lot of videos about Genesys, but again, a part of that is, one, my job has been screwing me over and making me work during Genesys events that we do host, so there's that. But two, there's not a lot of Genesys in my community to play, and partly to that is that I feel like there's no incentive when the top decks in Genesys are the top decks in Advanced, as well as there's not really any separate incentive on prizing for Genesys. Genesys local is not going to get the Winamat. They're going to get OTS that you can get playing Advanced. But anyway, that is the current news and update for Genesys. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. Come below, take a video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Just help the channel, help series, helps me as a whole. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.